Hello everyone, Ace here, and today, well, we're going to have to talk about what is, in my opinion, one of the worst news articles that I have read in a very long time. An article which, by the way, is in response to that recent video that MrBeast did when he cured a bunch of people of their blindness. Specifically, this article from TechCrunch, written by one Stephen Aquino, and titled MrBeast's Blindness Video Puts Systemic Ableism on Display, in which Mr. Aquino tries to critique MrBeast's actions by saying, quote, "In the broadest lens, the biggest problem with wanting to cure blindness is that it reinforces a moral superiority of sorts by those without disabilities over those who are disabled. Although not confronted nearly as often as racism and sexism, systemic ableism is pervasive through all parts of society. The fact of the matter is that the majority of abled people view disability as a failure of the human condition. As such, people with disabilities should be mourned and pitied. More pointedly, as MrBeast stated in his video's thumbnail, disabilities should be eradicated, cured." So yes, Mr. Aquino is unironically making the case that trying to cure blindness makes you a bigot. And not only that, but it's also somehow proof that you have a sense of moral superiority over someone who is disabled, which makes absolutely zero sense because being able does not grant you some greater moral authority or sense of moral accomplishment as opposed to being disabled. The only way someone could ever actually come to that conclusion is if they are one of those highly bigoted far-left woke activists. So already this article is a bit of a dumpster fire, but unfortunately we are just getting started. As Mr. Aquino later tries to defend this position by saying, quote, "Think about it. If you fell and broke your hand or your wrist, that would indeed be bad. You'd be disabled for some period of time. But the expectation during your recovery time would be that you're still human, still yourself to reasonably do everything you could do prior. You may find certain things inaccessible for a while and need some forms of assistive technology, but you would still be treated with dignity, and you wouldn't expect someone to miraculously reset your broken bone." Yet this is what MrBeast and his millions of minions are peddling with this video. They don't recognize the humanity of blind people, they only recognize the abhorrence of not being able to see. In other words, able people have a tendency to think disability defines us. So yes, Mr. Aquino seems to believe, and quite wrongly I might add, that people with disabilities in general are seen as not individuals, but rather as defined entirely by their disability. And again, the only people that would actually view disabled individuals in such a manner would be the woke far-left activists. Also, on the topic of the whole broken bone example, as someone who has personally had a broken bone in the past, I can safely say without any hesitation that while I wouldn't necessarily expect someone to miraculously fix that particular bone instantly, I would have very much preferred it at the time, rather than having to work with an injured and slowly healing appendage. But let's now move on to what is, in my opinion, the worst paragraph in this entire article, where Mr. Aquino says, quote, "My lived experience is unique because I have so much to draw from. I have visual disabilities, physical motor disabilities, and speech disabilities, and my parents were both fully deaf. Growing up, the oldest of two children, I served as the unofficial in-house interpreter for my parents. As a coda, I straddled the line between the deaf and hearing worlds. I know firsthand how deaf people look at their culture and their ways of life with immense pride. If someone cured deafness, what would happen to the people? Deaf culture is real. The culture would fade away because there'd be no reason for sign language to exist and the experiences derived from it." So first of all, remember when Mr. Aquino claimed that individuals with disabilities were in general defined exclusively by their disability? Well, this paragraph proves that that was a case of projection on the part of Mr. Aquino, that he defines individuals with disabilities by their disability, and does not see them as actual individuals. Which is already pretty spicy, but what really sets this paragraph apart is his argument that curing deafness would erase deaf people and deaf culture. In other words, Mr. Aquino is unironically making the argument that curing deafness would be an act of genocide against deaf people. Which I guess means that in the eyes of Mr. Aquino, MrBeast has enacted a final solution, a blindo cost, if you will, by providing medical aid to the visually impaired. I honestly don't know how to respond to that other than to constantly make fun of Mr. Aquino for the sheer stupidity on display here. But honestly, what can you expect from a person who follows an ideology that treats victimhood as a good thing and as a means to gain virtue signal points? For if we're talking about an ideology that treats victimhood as a fundamentally good thing, then doing things to actually fix that state of affairs must inevitably be condemned. With this in mind, I believe I've said all that really needs to be said here. So I'll end by saying that for those curious, I will of course be leaving a link in the description below to an archive of this article so you can check it out for yourself if you should so desire. But in any case, this has been Ace. Hope to see you guys again soon. Take care. Ace out.